Did you hire the right violin teacher? Are you getting your money's worth? Are you just wasting your time? Let's talk about it. Hi guys, this is Joel Kennedy, and today I'm doing my final video in a series about how to raise a musician child. And today I wanted to specifically talk about how to find a teacher that's a good match for your child. Now, as a teacher for many years, I've seen a lot of students come to me from other teachers who, unfortunately, were poisoned against their instrument and music. They had maybe horrible technique, or sometimes both. So what I'm hoping today is to help you avoid all of that. Now, a lot of those students that I saw were fixable. Some of them were not, because they'd had bad habits for so many years that there's not really much that you can do. And it was, really kind of painful to see, a parent spending thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours, driving the kids to these lessons where the kids weren't improving, they weren't going anywhere, it was very negative, and this could go on for years. So if there's anything that I can tell you guys today to kind of get you on the right road, then that'll be great. It'll make the video completely worthwhile. Now, I think there are probably three basic ways in which you can fairly easily determine whether you've got a good match for your child or not. The first one would be, what is their mood after their lesson? Now, the mood before their lesson is obviously, can be an indicator of whether the lessons are positive or not, but generally speaking, how they feel after the lesson is going to be the easiest way for you to be able to tell if the lessons are really working for your child or not. The way that I kind of look at it is kind of like, exercise. Most of us don't jump out of bed in the morning, eager and happy to go to the gym. But once we do go to the gym, we feel great. We feel wonderful, and we'll definitely do it again because it was a positive experience for us for a variety of reasons. Maybe not the best analogy, but the best one that I can come up with right now. Going to a violin lesson sometimes can be a little bit like the gym, because it's hard work and you have to concentrate a lot. So not everybody's always looking forward to that. However, after the lesson, the child should be in a pretty positive mood. Maybe they'll be tired because they worked hard, I don't know, but they should be pretty positive. They should be a little bit jazzed up. The teacher infused some energy, some excitement. They motivated them to practice. Maybe they are excited about a new piece, or maybe the teacher, reminded them how fun music can be. There's a lot of positive things that can happen from the lesson. Remember, you want the lessons to be positive because negative reinforcement does work, but only temporarily. Eventually, the kids will want to quit, and they'll start rebelling against you, the teacher, and music, and everything else. So you want the lessons to be positive, especially for the long term. Now, on the other side of it, let's say after the lesson, the kids are very discouraged. They're negative, they don't want to talk, they're just kind of gloomy. These are all indicators that the lesson did not make them feel very good about themselves, about the instrument, about their progress, about how things are going. Those are some big indicators. So really, how is your child after the lesson? That will tell you a lot about what goes on in the lesson. Now, the second thing would be, is their technique correct? Now, this is a little bit of a harder thing to talk about because it depends on your situation a lot. Does your child currently take with a teacher that's like their only teacher? Like they started with that teacher and that's the only teacher that they know? Well, it's probably going to be a little bit easier for you to determine if they're being taught proper technique or not, as opposed to a person who, let's say you just switched to a new teacher and you're wondering, is this new teacher better than the last one, or are we going in the right direction? Well, it depends on a lot of factors. How long has your child been taking? If your child has bad habits and bad technique, well, it's the fault of the other teacher. That means the new teacher, even if they're really good, it could take them a long time to be able to fix this stuff. And how long it takes them to fix it is determined on how long they've had these bad habits. So if they're pretty young, well, after about 4 to 6 months, I'd say with any teacher, it should be pretty easy for you to tell if the relationship is working or not. It takes kids about 4 to 6 months to kind of acclimate to any teacher. But let's say your student has been playing for years and then they've got a new teacher. Well, if they're a teenager or something like that, it could take, a year or 2 years, even for a really good teacher, to break some of the bad habits that may have been formed by the other teacher. The main point is that you want to see improvement. If you go to the lessons and you see that the teacher is talking about improving these technical issues, and you see that your child is improving on a monthly basis, well, that's a good indicator that things are at least going in the right direction. However, if you see the same bad habits that you saw for years in the other teacher and nothing is changing, well, that's an indicator of that something's not going right. So I'm going to talk about the technical aspects as if you're not a musician, so you don't know what you're looking at. So I'm just going to talk about the really obvious things that you as a parent, if you're not a musician, you can easily spot if your student is playing the violin or viola. Now, I'm not a cello or a bass teacher, so these will not apply to cello or bass, but they will apply to violin and viola. So first of all, you want to look at the left hand, right? And I'll put some videos or pictures up here somewhere on the video so you can see a little bit better. But on the left hand, you mostly just want to look at the wrist. The wrist should not be bent this way, and the wrist should not be bent this way. Basically, if you were to hold your arm down to your side and raise it up, the natural position that your wrist likes to take, that's the position that it should be on a violin or viola. So if you just look at your kid and you see them doing this, or when they're shifting, they shift like this, that's a red flag. Something needs to be fixed and fixed really soon. Now, as far as the right hand is concerned, you want to make sure that you don't see any straight joints, okay? There's 3 areas to look at in particular that are pretty obvious. Number 1 would be the thumb. That thumb, it doesn't need to be bent like this all the time, but what you don't want is it straight. You do not ever want to see a straight thumb. It should have some kind of bend in it so it's flexible, so it can move, okay? The other one would be the pinky. This pinky should be on top of the bow and it should be bent. This is a huge indicator that there are some serious issues going on with the teacher's ability to get the student to hold the bow properly. This is one of the more difficult aspects of teaching the violin because it's counterintuitive. Students naturally want to straighten their joints because they feel like they can hold the bow better. So an effective teacher will be able to teach a child to do something that's very counterintuitive, and that is to have the bent, flexible joints while they're holding the bow, because when you hold a bow properly, it feels like you're going to drop it. So you want to see that bent pinky, not a straight pinky like this. The other one would be these fingers right here. You do not want to see them raised up. Or sometimes what you'll see is you'll see one finger that's straight and the other ones are bent or something like that. All of these fingers, it's very simple. They just lay on top of the bow, your pinky's on top, your thumb's bent, your pinky's bent. So the first thing is that thumb. The second thing is this pinky. The third thing is these fingers right here. They should be bent. Now again, I'll point out though that, if your child learned this for a long time and they finally got a teacher, if that teacher is a good teacher, it could still take them, especially if the student's a teenager, it could take them years to be able to fix it. But what you want to look for is that the teacher is talking about it and that the student is making progress. Now, if you've got a younger kid, maybe they've only been taking for a few years and they've got a pinky like this or they got a straight thumb, run, all right? That means that you're paying for that teacher to not do their job, in my opinion. So number 3 on the list would be tracking their progress. Are they making good progress? Now, this is determined by a lot of different factors and it really depends on your situation, but I'll just tell you, what the progress is that I expected of my students. And many of them reached very advanced levels if I had them long enough and they were able to go to universities or conservatories. So I think it's a pretty good benchmark if you want a student that could be considered a pretty successful student. But your situation could be different, but I'll just tell you what my benchmarks were. So there's kind of 3 different levels that I look at. So number 1 would be like a beginner, let's say Suzuki Book 1 through 3. Now my students would generally learn about 2 new songs at a time, but they would complete one, every other lesson. So while they're polishing up one piece, they're learning a brand new piece. So they always had 2 pieces, and then they had all their exercises and their warm-ups, like their scales and stuff like that. So that's the beginner through, Suzuki Book 1 and Book 3. So every other week, they're starting a new song for the most part. Now, some kids, they could go twice as fast. They could learn 2 new songs every week. Some kids, half as fast. It really was dependent on how much time the parents spent with their kid during practice. So when their kids are little, a lot of it has to do with parental involvement. So then the next step would be like Suzuki Book 4 through 6. right? Now, these pieces, they take a little bit longer. Let's say they might take 4 to 6 weeks to really polish up, especially in Suzuki Book 4. So you got your sights, concerto, movements and stuff like that. About 4 to 6 weeks, I think they should be able to polish it up. Now, some kids take a little longer, some kids can do it a lot faster, but I give you these examples as a big ballpark figure because I've seen, believe it or not, some kids who could work on the most remedial pieces for months. I've seen kids work on Twinkle Twinkle for 3 or 4 months. I've seen kids work on pieces in Suzuki Book 4 for 6 months, right? That's a huge indicator. That's a giant red flag that something is really, really going on. There's no kid, if they're, have a reasonable amount of frequency in your practicing, they should not be on these pieces for that long. So something is wrong and you've got to figure something else out to do. So the next level would be like your more advanced players, right? So they're playing, some of the standard repertoire, sonatas and concertos and stuff like that. Chances are, if they're playing that stuff already, well, you probably don't need to be watching this video. You've already done enough things correctly that you don't need to listen to me. And chances are, if they're playing those pieces, they've already know how to practice. They probably have a pretty good teacher, but you do want to look at some of those technical things and whatnot. But yeah, it could take a kid, an advanced kid, 6 months, maybe a year to learn some of these more advanced concertos to really get them to the place where they can really want to perform them. So age and experience make a huge difference. So guys, I hope I've answered a few questions today. Hopefully I've stepped on as few toes as possible. If you have any other questions or comments, please put them in the video below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and of course that little alert bell so you get a notification when I create a new video. And of course don't forget, here at Kennedy Violins, we're all players and teachers, so we're always happy to answer any kind of question you have anytime. Thanks.